Commander Jake Morrison's hand froze halfway to the detonator when the alien appeared in his quarters. The creature materialized through the wall, its translucent form shimmering with an otherworldly blue light that made his eyes water. "Your staff are traitors," the alien's voice echoed directly in his mind, bypassing his ears entirely. "They will kill you in 47 minutes. Jake's pulse hammered against his temples. He was the commanding officer of humanity's first deep space colony station, orbiting a planet 12 light-years from Earth. 3,000 souls depended on his decisions. The alien before him belonged to the Viridian species, a race that had been observing humanity for decades but never made direct contact until now. "You have proof?" Jake kept his voice steady, his finger still resting near the emergency beacon that would alert security. The alien's form rippled, projecting holographic images into the air between them. Jake watched his second-in-command, Lieutenant Daniel Cooper, meeting with 3 other senior officers in a cargo bay. They stood around a cylindrical device that pulsed with crimson energy, their faces twisted with determination rather than fear. "They believe humanity is too dangerous to exist beyond Earth," the Viridian explained. "They will detonate an antimatter bomb in the station's core. Your species will be blamed for the destruction. The Galactic Council will quarantine Earth for 1,000 years. Jake's mind raced through the implications. Daniel had been his friend for 15 years. They had trained together, survived the Mars riots together, built this station together. But the evidence was undeniable. Timestamps showed the meeting had occurred just 20 minutes ago. "Why tell me?" Jake demanded. "Your people have stayed hidden for decades, because we have seen what humanity can become." The alien moved closer, its form solidifying into something almost human-shaped. "You have a choice. Alert your security, but the traitors will activate the bomb during the confrontation. 3,000 will die. Or you can be ruthless. You can do what they will not expect." Jake understood immediately. The alien was proposing something that would haunt him forever, something that went against every protocol, every law, every moral principle he had sworn to uphold, but 3,000 lives hung in the balance. The future of humanity among the stars depended on the next decision he made. "How many traitors?" Jake's voice came out barely above a whisper. 17. All positioned at critical points throughout the station. They are coordinated. They are ready to die for their cause. Jake pulled up his command interface, his hands moving with practiced efficiency despite the tremor in his fingers. He accessed the station's environmental systems, the airlocks, the security overrides. Everything he needed was at his fingertips. Everything that would make him a monster. "Show me all their locations," he said. The alien complied, and Jake Morrison made his choice. The holographic display showed 17 red dots scattered across the station's 3 main levels. Daniel Cooper was in the command center, just 2 corridors away. 3 traitors guarded the antimatter device in Cargo Bay 7. Others had positioned themselves near life support, communications, and the escape pod bays. They had planned this perfectly, assuming Jake would follow standard protocol when he discovered them. They were wrong. Jake's fingers flew across the interface, accessing systems that even most commanders never touched. The Viridian watched silently as he worked, its alien features impossible to read. Within 90 seconds, Jake had isolated every section where a traitor was stationed. He sealed blast doors, disabled manual overrides, and rerouted environmental controls. "You understand there is no return from this path," the alien said. "Your people will judge you." Jake's jaw clenched. Better they judge me alive than mourn them dead. He activated the protocol. Throughout the station, 17 sections simultaneously vented their atmosphere into space. It was instant. It was surgical. It was murder. The screams came through his comm system for exactly 12 seconds before the vacuum silenced them forever. Jake heard Daniel's voice among them, confused and terrified, calling his name, His friend died cursing him, not understanding why the man he trusted had killed him. Jake's hand shook as he closed the channel. His stomach threatened to empty itself across the control panel, but he forced himself to remain steady, to finish what he had started. He waited exactly 3 minutes to ensure no survival was possible. Then he restored atmosphere to the sealed sections and dispatched medical teams. The Viridian's form began to fade. "Remember this day, Commander. Remember that your species survives because you were willing to bear the weight of impossible choices. We will be watching." The alien vanished, leaving Jake alone with what he had done. The next hour passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Medical teams reported 17 fatalities from catastrophic decompression. Security began investigating the simultaneous system failures. Jake authorized the investigation while simultaneously covering his tracks, planting evidence of a malware attack that had randomly triggered the disaster. Chief Engineer Lisa Hamilton burst into his quarters without knocking, her face pale and streaked with tears. "Daniel's dead. So are 16 others. The system logs show cascade failures across multiple sections." "How is that even possible?" Jake met her eyes, hating the lie he was about to tell, hating himself for the ease with which it came. "I don't know. I've ordered a full investigation. We need to check every line of code, every hardware component." Lisa's hands trembled as she pulled up a datapad. "Jake, 3 of the dead were my best engineers. They were in critical areas. Life support, communications, the main reactor. If this was sabotage." "It was sabotage," Jake said quietly. "But not the kind you think." "What do you mean?" Jake made a decision. Lisa had been with him since the beginning. She deserved to know, even if it destroyed her faith in him. He pulled up the holographic evidence the Viridian had shown him, the footage of Daniel and the others around the antimatter bomb. Lisa's face went white as she watched. When the footage ended, she looked at Jake with dawning horror. "You knew. You killed them. They were going to destroy the station. 3,000 people, Lisa. They were willing to sacrifice everyone to prevent humanity from reaching the stars. So you just executed them? Without a trial? Without even trying to stop them another way?" Jake's voice remained steady despite the accusation in her eyes. "There wasn't time. They had the bomb armed and positioned. Any confrontation would have triggered it. I made the only choice that saved lives." Lisa backed toward the door, her expression shifting from horror to something worse, disgust mixed with understanding. "You're a monster." "Yes," Jake agreed, "but we're all still alive." She left without another word. Jake knew she would struggle with what she had learned, but he also knew she wouldn't report him. Lisa was practical above all else. She understood the mathematics of survival. Over the next week, Jake's investigation team discovered the antimatter device exactly where the Viridian had indicated. They found encrypted communications detailing the conspiracy. 17 officers who believed humanity was too violent, too destructive to be trusted among the stars. They had planned to eliminate the colony station and frame it as a tragic accident caused by human recklessness, giving Earth's political enemies the ammunition they needed to keep humanity contained. The official report called it a tragic system malfunction that coincidentally occurred during a terrorist plot. The 17 dead were posthumously labeled as conspirators whose plan had been foiled by random technical failures. Earth's government sent commendations. The Galactic Council, which had been quietly monitoring the situation, approved humanity's continued expansion into deep space. Jake Morrison was hailed as a hero for uncovering the plot, even though the official story claimed the terrorists had died before they could be arrested. Only Jake knew the truth. Only he carried the weight of 17 souls he had deliberately snuffed out. He saw their faces every time he closed his eyes. He heard Daniel's voice calling his name in those final, terrified seconds. But when he walked through the station's corridors and saw children playing, saw families gathering for meals, saw scientists excitedly discussing their research, he knew he would make the same choice again. The Viridian had called it being ruthless. Jake called it being realistic. Humanity had survived because someone was willing to bear the burden of dark necessities. Someone had to be the monster so others could remain innocent. He just wished it didn't have to be him. 3 months later, the Viridian returned. Jake was alone in the observation deck, staring at the swirling amber clouds of the planet below, when the familiar blue shimmer appeared beside him. He didn't flinch this time. Part of him had been expecting this. "You did well, Commander." The alien's mental voice carried something that might have been approval. "Your species has been granted provisional status in the galactic community. Your colony may expand." Jake turned to face the creature. Provisional status. What does that mean? It means you are being tested. The Viridian's form solidified, taking on more defined features. Humanity is not the first species to reach the stars carrying violence in its heart. But you are the first in 3,000 years to be given this opportunity. The Council is divided on whether your people can evolve beyond your destructive tendencies. "And what do you think?" Jake asked. "I think you proved something important when you made your choice." The alien moved closer to the viewport. "You understood that survival sometimes requires sacrifice. That leadership means carrying burdens others cannot bear. These are qualities the Council values." Jake's voice hardened. "I murdered 17 people based on the word of an alien I'd never met. For all I know, you manipulated me into eliminating your enemies." The Viridian's form rippled with what might have been amusement. "If we wanted them dead, Commander, we would have killed them ourselves. We have weapons that could erase your entire station without leaving a trace. We came to you because the choice had to be yours. The test was never about stopping the bomb. It was about whether humanity could produce leaders willing to make impossible decisions." Jake felt his stomach twist. "So those people had to die just so you could evaluate us?" "They chose to die the moment they planted that bomb." The Viridian's mental voice grew colder. "You simply chose who would die. Them or everyone else. Do not mistake ruthlessness for cruelty, Commander. Cruelty is purposeless harm. Ruthlessness is necessary action taken despite personal cost." Before Jake could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. His communicator exploded with panicked voices. He activated the device, and Lisa's face appeared on the screen, her eyes wide with fear. "Jake, we have incoming ships. 27 vessels just dropped out of hyperspace. They're not responding to hails, and their weapons are powered up." Jake's training took over. He sprinted toward the command center, the Viridian flowing alongside him like living smoke. "Who are they?" The Viridian's response sent ice through his veins. "The Kreth Dominion. They are the faction that opposed humanity's inclusion in the galactic community. They have decided to take matters into their own hands." Jake burst into the command center where his staff worked frantically at their stations. Lisa stood at tactical, her face grim as she coordinated the station's minimal defenses. The colony had some defensive capabilities, but nothing designed for military engagement. They were researchers and families, not soldiers. The main view screen showed the approaching fleet. Each Kreth ship was 3 times the size of the colony station, their hulls covered in weapon ports that glowed with charging energy. "Time until weapons range?" Jake demanded. 4 minutes, Lisa reported. "Jake, we can't fight these ships. We have to evacuate." Jake looked at the numbers. 3,000 people. Not enough escape pods for everyone. Even if there were, the Kreth ships would pick them off like shooting targets. His mind raced through scenarios, each one ending in catastrophe. The Viridian spoke directly into his thoughts. "Your weapons are insufficient. Your shields will fail in seconds. You have no chance of victory through conventional means. Then give us an unconventional option, Jake thought back. There is one possibility. The alien gestured and holographic schematics appeared in Jake's vision, invisible to everyone else in the room. Your station's reactor can be overloaded. The resulting explosion will destroy everything within 10,000 kilometers. The Kreth fleet is flying in tight formation. You could eliminate them all. And kill everyone on the station, Jake thought. Not everyone. The Viridian's form pulsed with urgent light. There is a Viridian vessel cloaked nearby. We can evacuate your population in 90 seconds using our transport technology. But you must begin the reactor overload now. Once the Kreth detect the power spike, they will destroy your station before you can evacuate. Jake's mind reeled. You're asking me to turn my station into a bomb, to lure them in and blow them up. I am offering you a chance to save your people and eliminate a threat that would otherwise hunt humanity for generations. The Viridian's mental voice pressed with urgency. The Kreth do not stop. They do not negotiate. They will follow your escape pods to Earth and burn your homeworld from orbit. This is your only chance. Jake looked around the command center. Lisa caught his eye, saw something in his expression that made her go still. The rest of his staff continued working, unaware of the impossible choice he faced. He thought of the 17 people he had already killed. He thought of Daniel's voice in those final seconds. He thought of the weight he had been carrying for 3 months, and he realized that weight was about to get heavier. Lisa, Jake said quietly, start evacuation procedures. Code Phoenix. Lisa's eyes widened. Code Phoenix was their doomsday scenario, used only if the station was about to be destroyed. But there were no ships nearby to evacuate to, no rescue fleet waiting. Yet something in Jake's voice made her nod and begin entering commands. The Viridian's form brightened. You have made the right choice, Commander. Jake accessed the reactor controls, his fingers steady despite the storm raging inside him. Stop calling them choices. Choices imply alternatives. You keep putting guns to my head and calling it leadership. Perhaps, the Viridian admitted. But you keep pulling the trigger. That is what makes your species dangerous. And that is why you might survive. Jake initiated the reactor overload sequence, watching the power levels begin their deadly climb. The station's computer immediately flagged the anomaly and demanded his authorization to continue. He provided it, overriding every safety protocol in the system. Lisa appeared at his side, her voice low enough that only he could hear. There's nowhere to evacuate to. The nearest Earth ship is 6 days away. Trust me, Jake said, praying he wasn't leading his people into another trap. Just get everyone to the main hangar bay. All 3,000, you have 80 seconds. Lisa stared at him for one long moment, then nodded and began barking orders. Throughout the station, alarms shifted to evacuation tones. Families grabbed their children. Scientists abandoned their experiments. Security personnel herded people toward the central hangar with urgent efficiency. On the view screen, the Kreth fleet continued its approach, unaware of what awaited them. Jake could see their formation tightening, could imagine the alien commanders congratulating themselves on cornering their prey. 60 seconds until weapons range, Tactical Officer Greg Norton reported. 35 seconds until reactor reaches critical mass. Jake opened a station-wide channel. This is Commander Morrison. I know you're scared. I know this seems impossible, but I need you to trust me one more time. Get to the hangar bay and wait for my signal. He paused, searching for words that might offer comfort. We're going home, all of us. He closed the channel before anyone could question him. The Viridian's form pulsed beside him. 30 seconds, Commander. Begin moving your people. Jake ran for the hangar bay, the Viridian keeping pace. Behind them, the command center staff followed, confused but obedient. They could feel the station vibrating now as the reactor strained against containment fields that were never meant to hold this much power. The hangar bay was chaos. 3,000 people packed into a space designed for cargo and shuttles. Children cried. Adults shouted questions. Security struggled to maintain order. Jake pushed through the crowd to the center of the space, climbing onto a cargo container so everyone could see him. "Everyone stay calm," he shouted over the noise. "Help is here. Just hold still and don't panic. What help?" Someone yelled back, "There are no ships." The Viridian's form suddenly expanded, becoming visible to everyone as it grew to fill half the hangar bay. The crowd gasped and surged backward, pressing against the walls. The alien's blue light intensified until it was almost painful to look at. Then the world shifted. Jake felt it like falling and flying simultaneously. Reality twisted in ways his brain couldn't process. Colors that didn't exist mixed with sounds he could taste and textures he could hear. For one eternal second, he was everywhere and nowhere, spread across infinite space and compressed into a single point. Then it stopped. They were standing in a massive chamber, easily 10 times larger than the hangar they had left. The walls glowed with soft bioluminescent light. The air smelled of ozone and something sweetly alien. Hundreds of Viridians floated around the perimeter, their forms shifting and pulsing with what might have been curiosity. "Welcome aboard the luminous pathway," the Viridian who had visited Jake announced to everyone's minds simultaneously. "You are safe." Back on the station, now empty and abandoned, the reactor reached critical mass. The explosion tore through the structure like a miniature sun being born. Metal vaporized. Walls became plasma. The blast wave expanded at a significant fraction of light speed, catching the Kreth fleet while their shields were still calibrated for conventional weapons. 27 warships died in the same instant, their antimatter cores adding their own fury to the conflagration. The explosion was visible from the planet below, a new star that burned bright for 11 seconds before fading. On the Viridian ship, Jake watched the destruction on a holographic display. He felt Lisa's hand grip his shoulder, felt the weight of 3,000 gazes on his back. They had survived. Humanity had survived. But he had destroyed humanity's first deep space colony to make it happen. The primary Viridian materialized in front of him. "You have passed the second test, Commander. You sacrificed infrastructure to preserve life. You weaponized your own home to protect your species. These are the actions of a race that might one day stand as equals in the galactic community." Jake's voice was hollow. "How many more tests? How many more impossible choices do I have to make?" "Until we are certain," the alien replied. "Until we know whether humanity will grow beyond its violent origins or whether you will become like the Kreth, spreading war and destruction across the stars." "And if we fail your tests?" "Then we will do what must be done." The Viridian's mental voice held no malice, only cold certainty. "We will contain your species to your solar system until you destroy yourselves or evolve. It has happened before. It will happen again." Lisa stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. "You manipulated us. You forced Jake to make these choices. How is that fair?" "Fair." The Viridian's form rippled. "Fairness is a luxury afforded to species without the power to end all life in a galaxy. You are children playing with antimatter. We are ancient beings trying to prevent you from burning down the nursery. We do what we must to ensure survival of all." Jake looked at his people, at the families huddled together, at the engineers and scientists who had built something beautiful among the stars only to see it destroyed. He saw fear in their eyes, but also trust. They had followed him through catastrophe twice now. They believed he would get them home. The weight on his shoulders grew heavier. "How long until we reach Earth?" he asked. 6 days at standard velocity. The Viridian gestured, and comfortable seating began forming from the ship's walls. We will provide food and shelter. Your people will be cared for. And then what? Lisa demanded. What happens when we get home? Then the Viridian said, We see if humanity learns from what has happened here. We see if you can become the species you have the potential to be. Or if you remain the violent children we fear you are. The 6-day journey to Earth passed in a strange mixture of wonder and tension. The Viridians provided everything the humans needed: quarters that adjusted to individual preferences, food that somehow tasted like home despite being synthesized from alien technology, and medical care that healed injuries humanity didn't know could be healed. But it was a gilded cage. Jake spent most of the journey in his assigned quarters, reviewing reports and preparing his explanation for Earth's government. How did you tell the leaders of humanity that their first colony had been destroyed, that 17 officers had been executed without trial, that they were now subject to the judgment of aliens who had been watching them for decades? On the 5th day, Lisa found him staring out a viewport at the stars. She had barely spoken to him since the evacuation, organizing the refugees instead, keeping people calm. Now she stood beside him in silence for several minutes before speaking. I understand why you did it. Her voice was soft, almost broken. The first time, and the second time. I understand the math, but Jake, when does it end? When do we stop being tested? Jake kept his eyes on the stars. When we prove we're worth keeping alive, I suppose. And if we can't, if we're not what they want us to be, then I guess we figure out how to survive anyway. Jake turned to face her. That's what humans do, Lisa. We survive. Sometimes we do it beautifully. Sometimes we do it ugly. But we survive. Lisa's expression softened slightly. You carry this burden alone, don't you? The decision to kill Daniel and the others. The decision to destroy the station. You haven't told anyone else the truth. Jake shook his head. And I won't. Let them think it was all tragic accidents and close calls. Let them sleep at night. That's what leaders do. We carry the weight so others don't have to. That's not leadership, Lisa said quietly. That's martyrdom. Maybe there's no difference, Jake replied. Not at this level. Not when the stakes are this high. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the Viridians tend to the evacuated colonists. The aliens moved with fluid grace, providing blankets and food, calming frightened children with gentle mental touches. They seemed genuinely concerned for humanity's welfare, even as they tested them with impossible choices. Jake thought about the 17 traitors he had killed. He thought about the colony station he had turned into a weapon. He thought about all the choices he hadn't made, all the paths he couldn't take, and he wondered how many more times he would have to become a monster to keep his people safe. Lisa stood beside him, her voice quiet. They'll probably court-martial you when we get back. Destroying the station, those 17 deaths. Earth Command won't understand. Probably, Jake agreed. But they'll be alive to court-martial me. That's what matters. Lisa was silent for a long moment. Then she said, For what it's worth, I would have made the same choices. I don't know if that makes you a hero or a monster. Maybe it makes you both. Jake watched his people settling into their temporary accommodations, watched parents comforting children, watched engineers already discussing how they would rebuild. Humanity's resilience had always been its greatest strength. They had survived ice ages and plagues, wars and disasters. They would survive this too. But Jake knew the real test was yet to come. The Viridians were watching. The galactic community was judging. And somewhere out there, other alien races were deciding whether humanity deserved to reach the stars or whether they should be pushed back into their solar system and left to stagnate. He had made ruthless choices to save his people. He had killed friends and destroyed humanity's first colony. He had done things that would haunt him until his dying breath. The question was whether it would be enough. The Viridian seemed to read his thoughts. "Rest now, Commander. The hardest tests are still ahead." Jake wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, wanted to rage against the cosmic game being played with humanity's future. But he was exhausted, hollowed out by the weight of his decisions. He found a seat against the wall and closed his eyes, knowing that sleep would bring the faces of the people he had killed. Around him, 3,000 souls settled in for the journey home. They talked in hushed voices, comforted frightened children, and tried to process what had happened. Many looked at Jake with a mixture of gratitude and fear. He had saved them twice now, but at a cost that kept growing. Lisa sat down beside him, her voice barely a whisper. The Kreth fleet. Was that real or another test? Jake opened his eyes and met her gaze. Does it matter? Either way, I turned our home into a weapon and killed thousands of beings. They were coming to kill us, Lisa said, but her voice lacked conviction. So I'm told, Jake replied, by the same aliens who set all this in motion. The same ones who admitted they're testing us. How do we know anything they've told us is true? Lisa had no answer to that. Jake closed his eyes and saw Daniel Cooper's face, heard his friend's final terrified seconds. He saw 17 bodies floating in vacuum. He saw a space station exploding into oblivion. And he knew, with terrible certainty, that this was only the beginning. Earth appeared on the 6th day, a blue marble that somehow looked different than when Jake had left it. He realized nothing had changed about the planet. He was the one who had changed. The Viridian ship descended through the atmosphere without triggering any defense systems, as if they didn't exist. They landed in a secure military facility outside Washington where armed soldiers and government officials waited with weapons trained on the alien vessel. Jake led his people down the boarding ramp, stepping onto Earth soil for the first time in 18 months. The commander of the ground forces, General Christine Palmer, approached with her weapon lowered, but ready. Commander Morrison. The general's voice was clipped and professional. We received your emergency transmission. The loss of the colony is a tragedy. We're prepared to debrief you and provide medical attention for the survivors. Jake met her eyes and saw the questions lurking there, the suspicion and confusion. Earth had received only his coded message about the station's destruction and incoming Viridian ship. They knew nothing of the traitors, the tests, or the impossible choices he had made. General, we need to talk. Jake glanced back at the Viridian ship, where several of the aliens watched from the entrance. Privately. The debriefing lasted 14 hours. Jake told them everything. The traitor conspiracy. The Viridian warning. The 17 deaths by explosive decompression. The Kreth fleet. The decision to turn the colony into a weapon. He watched their faces shift from shock to horror to cold calculation as they processed what humanity had been subjected to. General Palmer leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. So these Viridians have been testing us, manipulating our people to die, forcing you to make choices no human should have to make. And now they expect us to just accept this? Jake shook his head. They expect us to prove we're worthy of joining their galactic community, or they'll contain us to our solar system until we destroy ourselves. The general's hand clenched into a fist. And if we refuse their tests? Then we'll find out what happens when humanity says no to beings who can transport 3,000 people across light years in an instant. Jake's voice was flat, emotionless. We'll find out if we can stand alone against whatever else is out there. The room fell silent. Everyone present understood the implications. Humanity had encountered forces beyond their comprehension, beings who viewed them as children playing with dangerous toys. The question was how to respond without triggering a conflict they couldn't win. Secretary of Defense Kenneth Wright spoke up. "What do you recommend, Commander?" Jake thought about everything he had endured, every choice that had carved pieces from his soul. "We play their game. For now. We prove we can be ruthless when necessary, but principled when possible. We show them humanity isn't just capable of violence, we're capable of growth. And while we're doing that, we prepare. We build defenses they don't expect. We study their technology. We make sure that if their tests ever become something worse, we're ready." General Palmer nodded slowly. "You understand this will likely mean more tests, more impossible choices." Jake met her gaze steadily. "Then we make sure those choices are made by people strong enough to bear them, people willing to become monsters so others can stay human." The general stood, walking to the window that overlooked the facility grounds. Below, the 3,000 colonists were being processed, given medical attention, reunited with families who had feared them dead. They would return to their lives, forever changed, but alive. They would tell stories of the colony, of the explosion, of their miraculous rescue. Most would never know the full truth of what Jake had done. "Morrison," the general said without turning around, "you killed 17 people without trial. You destroyed billions of dollars in infrastructure. By any standard, you committed murder and sabotage." "Yes, ma'am," Jake agreed. He felt no need to justify or excuse his actions. Palmer turned to face him, her expression softer than before. "You also saved 3,000 lives. Twice. You made decisions that I'm not sure I could have made. Decisions that will probably haunt you for the rest of your life." She paused. "Earth Command is prepared to give you a full pardon for all actions taken during the crisis. We're also prepared to promote you to Admiral and put you in charge of our new Deep Space Defense Initiative. Someone has to coordinate humanity's response to these tests. Someone who understands what's at stake." Jake felt the weight of it settling on his shoulders, heavier than before. "You're asking me to be humanity's monster, permanently." "I'm asking you to be humanity's protector," Palmer corrected. "The rest is semantics." Jake looked around the room at the officials and officers who would shape Earth's future. He thought about Lisa and the other survivors, about Daniel and the 17 conspirators, about all the choices yet to come. Then he stood and saluted. "I accept, ma'am, on one condition." "Name it. If I ever tell you something needs to be done, no matter how ruthless or terrible it seems, you trust me enough to let me do it. No oversight committees, no political debates. When the galaxy is testing us, we don't have time for democracy." The room erupted in arguments, officials shouting about oversight and accountability. General Palmer raised her hand for silence, then looked at Jake with something that might have been respect or might have been pity. "Agreed," she said. "God help us all." Jake Morrison left the debriefing room knowing he had just become exactly what the Viridians wanted to see. A human capable of impossible choices. A leader willing to sacrifice everything, including his own humanity, to ensure his species survived. He thought about the aliens' words. That humanity's survival depended on producing people willing to make ruthless decisions. That the tests would continue until they proved themselves worthy. As he walked through the facility toward his new quarters, Jake understood the horrible truth. The Viridians weren't testing humanity, they were creating it, forging it through fire and impossible choices into something that could stand among the stars. They were making monsters of men and calling it leadership. And the worst part was, it was working. Jake paused at a window, looking up at the night sky where the Viridian ship still hovered, silent and patient. Somewhere up there, among those stars, were more tests waiting. More choices that would carve away pieces of his soul. more moments when he would have to become the monster so others could remain innocent. He had saved humanity twice by making ruthless choices. The question that would haunt him forever was simple and terrible. How many times could he save humanity before there was nothing human left in him to save? The stars offered no answer, only their cold and distant light.